Why did every vampire in the room kneel when the crown touched the human girl's head? Sydney Bennett had no answer. 1 second, she was crouched beside a fallen stack of antique books in Marino Hall, trying to gather the scattered pages before anyone blamed her for the mess. The next, a silver crown rested against her dark hair, cold as winter glass, while more than 200 guests dropped to one knee. The music stopped first, then the whispers. Then every candle flame in the vast ballroom bent toward her as though pulled by an invisible wind. Sydney froze with one hand still pressed to the marble floor. She could hear her own heartbeat, fast, human, far too loud in a room filled with creatures who could hear a pin fall from 50 feet away. In front of her stood a little girl in a pale silver dress. She looked no older than 8. Her white skin was almost luminous beneath the chandeliers, and her grey eyes carried the solemn weight of someone who had spent too much time being watched and not enough time being understood. A few moments earlier, Sydney had found her standing alone beside a pillar while servants fixed her sleeves. Guards checked the room. Noblewomen whispered about how a princess should stand. No one had noticed the loose strand of hair stuck to the girl's cheek. No one had noticed her trembling hands. Sydney had. She had set down her tray, removed the plain black clip from her own hair, and gently pinned the child's silver blonde curl into place. "You don't have to look perfect to deserve kindness," Sydney had whispered. The girl had stared at her as if no one had ever said anything so strange. Then she had smiled. Now that same child stood without a crown, looking calmer than anyone else in the room. Sydney slowly lifted both hands toward the silver band on her head. "Sweetheart," she said carefully, "I think this belongs to you." The crown did not move. She tried again. Her fingers touched cool metal, but the band seemed rooted through the hall. Not loud, worse than loud, the kind of whisper that carried fear. Impossible. She is human. The crown accepted her. Sydney's stomach tightened. She looked toward the nearest guard, hoping someone would explain, but the guard had lowered his head. So had the women in jeweled gowns. So had the men who looked as though they owned half the city. Every vampire was kneeling to a woman whose bank account held less than $300. Then the great doors opened. The sound was soft, yet the entire room seemed to shrink around it. A man stood at the top of the black marble staircase, Vincent Marino. Sydney knew the name even before someone breathed it. Everyone in New York knew the Marino name. Marino Holdings owned hotels, hospitals, shipping companies, and entire blocks of Manhattan real estate. But the man descending the stairs did not look like a businessman. He looked like a king who had spent centuries teaching the world not to challenge him. He was tall, dressed in a black suit with no ornament except a silver ring on one hand. His skin was white, but his face was far paler than Sydney's, almost colorless beneath the golden lights. Dark hair framed sharp features that seemed carved rather than born. His eyes were grey at first. Then he saw the crown. They turned silver. Vincent stopped halfway down the staircase. No one moved. No one breathed loudly enough to be heard. Sydney felt the little girl step closer to her side. "Evelyn," Vincent said. His voice was quiet. It did not need to be loud. The walls seemed to listen. "What have you done?" So this was Evelyn Marino. The vampire down at the child, suddenly aware that she had touched royal hair with a $5 drugstore clip. Evelyn lifted her chin. "I gave her my crown, father." A woman near the throne made a small, shocked sound. Vincent continued down the stairs, each step slow and controlled. Why? Evelyn reached for Sydney's hand. Her fingers were cold, but her grip was certain, because she was the only person here who saw me. Vincent's gaze moved to Sydney. It felt like standing beneath a winter sky with nowhere to hide. Sydney wanted to explain that she had not asked for the crown, had not known who Evelyn was, and had no interest in becoming part of whatever ancient disaster had just begun. But before she could speak, a symbol of silver light appeared beneath her feet. Thin lines spread across the marble, forming a circle around her and Evelyn. The vampires nearest them recoiled. Vincent did not. He stared at the glowing mark, and for the first time, something cracked through the perfect stillness of his face. Not anger, not yet, fear. "The Mercy Regency," an elderly man whispered. "It has awakened." Sydney looked from the light to Vincent. "I don't know what that means." Vincent reached the final stair. He stood less than 10 feet away, pale and motionless, his eyes fixed on the crown that refused to leave her head. "It means," he said, "that until sunset every vampire in this kingdom must recognize your authority." Sydney almost laughed, but no one else did. Outside the covered windows, afternoon light pressed against the heavy curtains. Evelyn squeezed her hand and looked up with complete trust. "Don't worry," the little princess said. "You only have to be queen for one afternoon." Vincent's expression turned colder. Around them, hundreds of immortal nobles remained on their knees, and Sydney Bennett understood one terrible thing. The child had not given her a costume. She had given her power 3 hours earlier. Sydney Bennett had entered Marino Hall through the service entrance with a borrowed uniform, a temporary identification badge, and exactly $287 in her checking account. She needed every hour of this shift. Her grandmother's prescription refill was due on Monday. The rent was already late, and the event agency had promised double pay if she completed the royal reception without complaints. The supervisor met her beneath a row of dim yellow lights and pointed toward a narrow corridor. Human staff stay on the east side. Do not enter the private wings. Do not touch royal property. Do not address a guest unless spoken to first. Sydney fastened her dark hair with a plain black clip. Understood, and do not stare. The supervisor leaned closer. They noticed fear. Sydney almost asked who they were, but the cold air answered before he could. Marino Hall looked less like a mansion than a piece of another century hidden inside Manhattan. Black marble covered the floors. Silver branches framed the walls. Heavy curtains sealed every window against the afternoon sun. The guests arrived without noise. Dressed in dark suits and jeweled gowns, their pale faces calm beneath the chandeliers. They moved with impossible precision. No one bumped a shoulder. No one spilled a drink. No one seemed to breathe unless they remembered to. Sydney carried a tray of sparkling water through the ballroom and kept her eyes lowered. She had worked luxury events before, but wealth usually announced itself with laughter and expensive perfume. This room announced itself with silence. Near the center of the hall stood a little girl in a silver dress. 4 guards surrounded her. 2 attendants adjusted the fabric at her shoulders. An older woman corrected the angle of her chin. "Stand straight, Your Highness." The child obeyed. "Do not fidget. Smile when the council arrives." Her mouth curved, but her grey eyes did not. Sydney passed them twice. On the 3rd pass, she noticed the girl's left shoe ribbon had come loose. No one else did. One attendant discussed the evening schedule. Another checked the child's gloves. The guards watched the doors. The girl took one small step backward, then another, until she slipped behind a marble column. Sydney should have kept walking. The rules were clear. Instead, she followed the soft sound of hurried shoes into a side corridor. The girl had disappeared through an open library door. Inside, shelves rose nearly 30 feet toward a painted ceiling. The child stood on her toes, reaching for a blue book placed far above her head. "Careful," Sydney said. The girl spun around. Fear flashed across her face before royal stillness replaced it. "You are not supposed to be here. Neither are you, apparently." Sydney set down her tray and reached for the book. The title was The Moon Garden. "Is this what you wanted?" The girl nodded. Sydney handed it over, but the child held it against her chest without opening it. "My mother used to read this to me." Sydney heard the past tense and did not ask the question adults always ask too quickly. "It must be a good story. I do not remember the ending." Sydney glanced toward the doorway. "No guards yet. We could find out." They sat on the carpet between 2 shelves. The temporary server and the child Sydney still assumed belonged to some important family. Sydney read about a garden that only bloomed beneath moonlight. Her voice was quiet. The girl listened without moving, except when one silver-blonde curl fell across her cheek. Halfway through the story, footsteps sounded beyond the library. The child's shoulders tightened. Sydney closed the book. "Do you want to go back?" "No." The answer came too fast. "Everyone looks at me there. People are looking at you here too." The girl glanced around the empty library. Sydney smiled. "The people in the paintings. They seem judgmental." A small laugh escaped the child. It was quick and surprised, as if she had forgotten she could make that sound. Sydney noticed her hair had become tangled beneath a decorative comb. She removed her own black clip and gently secured the loose curl. "There. Is it perfect?" "No." Sydney softened her voice. "You do not have to look perfect to deserve kindness." For several seconds the child said nothing. Then she looked toward the covered windows, where thin lines of sunlight pressed around the curtains. "What would you do," she asked, "if you were queen for one day?" Sydney considered the question. "I would ask why a room full of adults needs a child to pretend she is not tired." The girl stared at her. Somewhere beyond the library, a deep male voice ordered the doors sealed. Guards began calling one name through the halls. "Evelyn." The child rose and held out her hand. "Come with me, Sydney." Sydney had never told her that name. Before she could ask how the girl knew it, Evelyn smiled with a secret confidence far older than 8 years. "I want to show you my crown." Vincent Marino had ruled creatures older than nations, negotiated peace between enemies who had hated one another for centuries. and ended arguments with a single quiet glance. None of that had prepared him for the sound of his daughter laughing with a human stranger. He heard it from the far end of the west corridor, soft and brief, almost hidden beneath the hurried footsteps of guards searching Marino Hall. Vincent stopped so suddenly that the men behind him nearly collided. "Where?" he asked. Captain Elias pointed toward the Royal Library. "The eastern doors were found open, Your Majesty." Princess Evelyn entered without her escort. Vincent's expression did not change, but the temperature in the corridor dropped. 8 years earlier, he had carried Evelyn away from the chamber where her mother had taken her final breath. Since that night, every doorway had become a possible threat. Every unfamiliar face had become a question he could not afford to answer incorrectly. He had doubled the guards, closed the private gardens, dismissed tutors who grew too familiar, and replaced bedtime stories with security reports delivered outside Evelyn's room. He told himself it was protection. He never asked what it felt like to be protected by walls that never opened. "Seal the hall," Vincent said. "No guest leaves. No staff member changes position." Elias bowed. "And the human employees? Keep them where they are." Vincent moved before the captain could ask more. His polished shoes made almost no sound against the black marble, but everyone in the corridor sensed him coming. Servants stepped aside, guards lowered their heads. Councilor Adrian Blackwood emerged from an adjoining chamber, his silver-trimmed coat perfectly arranged despite the confusion. "I heard the princess is missing." "She is not missing," Vincent said. "She is inside my home. That distinction may not comfort the council. The threats against her have increased. This is precisely why the human separation decree must be signed today." Vincent kept walking. "My daughter is not an argument for your legislation." Adrian matched his pace. Human workers move through these halls, carrying trays, keys, and information. One careless act could expose her. Vincent stopped outside the library doors. "Then it is fortunate that I do not make royal policy while afraid." Adrian's mouth tightened. "Fear has nothing to do with caution. It has everything to do with what men call caution when they want power." Vincent opened the door. The library fell silent. Evelyn stood beside a human woman in a black service uniform. The woman immediately stepped in front of the child. Not far, only half a step, but enough. Vincent noticed everything: her inexpensive shoes, the temporary badge pinned above her heart, the black clip missing from her dark hair, the slight tremor in her fingers that she was trying to hide. Most humans looked at him and saw death, money, or legend. This one looked at him as if he were simply a man who had frightened a little girl. "Please lower your voice," she said. Every guard behind Vincent became perfectly still. Adrian stared at her in disbelief. Vincent entered the room. "You are standing between the Vampire King and his daughter. I am standing between a frightened child and a room full of people who keep speaking about her as if she is not here." Evelyn reached around the woman and took her hand. Vincent's gaze dropped to their joined fingers. His daughter rarely touched anyone. She had stopped reaching for him 3 years ago. He had noticed. He had simply never known how to repair it. "Her name is Sydney Bennett," Evelyn said. Vincent looked at the identification badge. "I can see that." She read Mother's story to me. Something old and carefully buried moved through him. The Moon Garden had been Isabelle's favorite. Vincent had ordered the book preserved after her death, then placed it on a shelf too high for Evelyn to reach. He had called that preservation too. "You entered a restricted room," he told Sydney. "The door was open. You approached the princess without authorization. I did not know she was a princess." Adrian stepped forward. Sydney turned toward him. "Neither is authority." A guard drew a quiet breath. Vincent should have ended the exchange. He should have removed Sydney, reassigned the staff, and restored order before the council arrived. Instead, he studied the simple black clip holding Evelyn's silver blonde curl away from her face. It was an ordinary object, cheap plastic, nothing that belonged in a royal portrait. Evelyn touched it carefully, as if it were more precious than the jewels waiting for her in the ballroom. "Why did you follow her?" Vincent asked. Sydney met his eyes. "Because everyone else was watching the doors." "And you?" "I was watching her." The answer struck harder than accusation. For years, Vincent had watched every door, every window, every shadow. He had watched for danger until danger became the only thing he could see. Evelyn tugged gently on Sydney's hand. "I asked her what she would do if she were queen." Adrian gave a cold laugh. "An ambitious question for a temporary server." "She did not ask it," Evelyn said. "I did." Vincent looked at his daughter. "And what did she answer?" Evelyn's expression softened. She said she would ask why a room full of adults needed a child to pretend she was not tired. Silence filled the library. Vincent saw the faint shadows beneath Evelyn's eyes. He saw the tightness in her shoulders. He saw too late what a stranger had seen in minutes. Then the distant bell rang, announcing the arrival of the full council. Evelyn released Sydney's hand and walked toward Vincent. For one hopeful second he thought she might reach for him. Instead, she passed him and headed toward the ballroom. At the doorway, she looked back at Sydney. "Come with me. I promise to show you my crown." Vincent watched Sydney hesitate, then follow. Adrian leaned close enough for only him to hear. "You should remove that woman before the princess becomes attached." Vincent's silver eyes remained on his daughter. "No," he said quietly. "I want to know why she already is." The ballroom doors opened before Evelyn, and the ceremony that had been delayed for her absence finally began to move again. Silver banners hung above the black marble floor. Hundreds of vampire nobles stood in silent rows beneath chandeliers that burned without smoke. At the far end of the hall, a narrow pedestal waited beneath a carved arch covered in dark velvet. On it rested a delicate crown of silver branches surrounding one pale stone. Sydney followed 3 steps behind Evelyn, still holding the blue storybook from the library. Vincent entered after them and immediately raised one hand. "No one leaves this room. No one approaches my daughter or Sydney Bennett without my permission." Guards moved into position along every entrance. The order was calm but absolute. Adrian Blackwood watched Sydney with a look that made the air feel colder. Evelyn walked toward the pedestal. 2 attendants hurried forward to straighten her dress, but she stopped them. "I can do it myself." The attendants withdrew. Sydney noticed the child's shoulders were still tight, even though every person in the room had lowered their head to her. Adrian stepped toward the council seats. "The heir may now receive the crown of mercy and renew the pledge of protection." Evelyn looked at the crown, then back at Sydney. "Come here." Sydney hesitated. "Your Highness, I should return to the service hall." "You said kindness does not depend on being perfect." "It does not. Does it depend on whether people are watching?" Sydney felt every gaze in the room turn toward her. She crossed the marble slowly. Evelyn lifted the crown with both hands. Vincent's eyes narrowed. "Evelyn." His daughter faced him. "You told me the crown belongs to the heir. You also told me the heir must learn whom to trust." Adrian stepped forward. "Princess, the crown is not part of a lesson." Evelyn did not look at him. "I know." Before Sydney could move, Evelyn rose on her toes and placed the crown on her head. Cold silver touched Sydney's hair. Light flashed beneath her shoes. The entire court dropped to one knee. Sydney reached up at once, but the crown would not move. "Please take it back," she whispered. Evelyn shook her head. "Not yet." Vincent crossed the floor in 3 silent steps. "Sydney Bennett, remove it." "I am trying." She pulled again. Nothing. Thin silver lines spread across the marble, forming a circle around her and Evelyn. Vincent turned sharply. Archivist Hale, an elderly vampire near the council benches, rose only halfway from his kneeling position. His eyes were fixed on the symbols glowing across the floor. "I have studied these markings, Your Majesty. They belong to the original Mercy Covenant." Adrian's expression hardened. "A dormant law cannot override royal authority." Hale swallowed. "The law is not dormant if the crown has answered." Vincent looked at him. "Explain." "A direct heir may voluntarily entrust the crown to another between noon and sunset. If the crown accepts that person, the chosen individual becomes Mercy Regent until sundown. The regent cannot claim the throne, change succession, seize royal property, or command punishment. But in matters involving innocent life, the regent may invoke limited royal authority." Sydney stared at him. "I do not want authority. Intent does not end the covenant," Hale said. Adrian stepped inside the edge of the silver circle, but the light brightened and forced him to stop. His eyes sharpened. "Then the transfer must be declared invalid. The princess acted without guidance." "I acted by choice," Evelyn said. "A child's choice can be manipulated." Adrian turned towards Sydney. "This woman entered a restricted room, isolated the heir, and encouraged emotional dependence." "I read her a book," Sydney said. "And she listened to me," Evelyn added. Vincent looked at his daughter. "Did Sydney ask for the crown?" "No." "Did anyone instruct you to give it to her?" "No." Adrian's voice became smooth. "Then the council must examine the heir's judgment. Under the succession safeguard, an improper transfer may be used to question her fitness to inherit." Hale closed his eyes briefly before confirming. "The provision exists, but only if the regency is rejected before its term is completed, or if the chosen regent abuses the crown." Sydney looked at Evelyn. The child's face had gone still, but her fingers were trembling. Adrian had not been trying to protect tradition. He had been waiting for a reason to place Evelyn's future under council control. Vincent understood it at the same moment. His gaze turned silver. "You will not use my daughter's trust as a political weapon." "Then permit the regency to continue," Adrian replied. "Test the human openly. If she is as harmless as the princess believes, the matter ends at sunset." Vincent looked toward the covered western windows. "How long?" Hale checked the ancient clock above the arch. 3 hours and 42 minutes. Sydney knelt before Evelyn. "If I stay, they cannot punish you for choosing me." "Not unless you misuse the crown," Evelyn whispered. Sydney rose. She did not look at Adrian. She looked at Vincent. "I do not want your throne, your money, or your title, but I will not walk away while your council turns a child's trust into evidence against her." The pale stone in the crown shone brighter. Vincent studied her for a long moment, then faced the room. "The Mercy Regency will continue until sunset. Sydney Bennett remains under royal protection. Any attempt to threaten, bribe, isolate, or compel her will be treated as interference with the crown." Adrian bowed, but satisfaction flickered behind his eyes. "Then let the test begin." Sydney felt the crown grow colder against her skin. Around her, hundreds of immortals remained on their knees, waiting to discover what a poor human woman would do when given power she had never asked for. The first test arrived disguised as generosity. Adrian Blackwood ordered the court to rise, then gestured toward a long table that servants had quietly placed beneath the eastern balcony. On it waited a leather folder, a silver key, and a sealed medical file bearing Margaret Bennett's name. Sydney's breath caught. She had never told anyone in Marino Hall about her grandmother, Adrian noticed. "The crown grants access," he said. "Access reveals need." Vincent stood beside Evelyn near the throne, his expression unreadable. "Choose your next words carefully, Adrian. I am offering the regent an opportunity." Adrian opened the leather folder. Inside was a contract guaranteeing Sydney a townhouse on the Upper East Side, a permanent income, and full medical care for Margaret at a private hospital. "One signature," he said. "No debt. No conditions beyond a formal statement that the council treated you fairly." Sydney looked at the medical file. Her grandmother's prescription list was clipped to the first page. So was the estimate for a procedure they had postponed twice. For one dangerous second, the ballroom disappeared. She saw Margaret at their kitchen table, cutting pills in half to make them last. She saw the overdue notices hidden beneath a ceramic fruit bowl. She saw every night Sydney had promised things would improve without knowing how. Adrian slid a pen across the table. "Power should improve the life of the person holding it. That is what you believe?" Sydney asked. "That is what every honest person believes." She touched the edge of the folder, then closed it. "My grandmother needs care. She does not need me to trade a child's future for it." Adrian's smile thinned. "You are refusing help out of pride." "No, I am refusing a favor designed to become evidence." The pale stone in the crown warmed against her forehead. A quiet murmur moved through the court. Adrian lifted the silver key. Then perhaps employment, a private apartment on the estate, a royal salary, protection for life. For doing what? Remaining available to the princess. Sydney looked at Evelyn. The girl was watching her carefully, as if every answer mattered. "People are not purchased for children," Sydney said, "and children should not be taught that affection comes with a contract." Vincent's gaze shifted toward her. Something in his face softened, then vanished. Adrian closed the box around the key. "Very principled. Let us see how principle performs under pressure." A guard approached and whispered into his ear. Adrian listened, then turned toward the court. "For security reasons, the East Service Wing has been sealed. Human employees will remain there until the regency ends." Sydney looked toward the service doors. "How many people? Irrelevant. How many?" Vincent answered before Adrian could. 17. Sydney felt the crown pulse. Archivist Hale stepped forward. "The regent may use one of 3 protected authorities. She may compel a sworn answer, suspend an order that places innocent life at immediate risk, or open a formal hearing before sunset." Adrian spread his hands. "No one is at risk. They are simply being contained." A faint pounding sounded beyond the eastern wall, then another. Sydney recognized the service supervisor's voice, muffled by thick doors. "The kitchen ventilation is off." Vincent turned toward the guards. "Who ordered the seal?" Adrian answered. "My office. Standard containment procedure. With the ventilation disabled, an oversight." Sydney looked at Hale. "If I suspend the order, does that count as one of the 3 authorities?" "Yes. And once used, I cannot take it back?" "Correct." Adrian's eyes held quiet satisfaction. He expected her to save the power for herself. Sydney faced the eastern doors. "Open them." Hale lifted his chin. "State the authority." The room waited. "By the Mercy Covenant, I suspend the sealing order on the East Service Wing." Release every person inside and restore the ventilation immediately. Silver light traveled from the crown across the floor and vanished beneath the doors. The locks clicked open. 17 employees emerged into the corridor, shaken but unharmed. Sydney's supervisor leaned against the wall, breathing deeply. A young dishwasher raised one hand. Adrian's expression changed by less than an inch. Vincent noticed. "Speak," he commanded. The young man swallowed. Before the doors closed, 2 council guards moved metal crates through the kitchen freight entrance they took toward the old basement. Adrian's voice sharpened. "Confusion is common during an emergency." "It was not an emergency then," the dishwasher said. "And the crates had red symbols painted on them. A burning eye." The ballroom went still. Vincent descended from the throne platform. "Captain Elias, search the basement." Adrian stepped forward. "Your Majesty?" Opening secured shipments during a public ceremony would be unwise. Vincent stopped beside Sydney. "Then it is fortunate wisdom does not require your permission." 10 minutes later, Elias returned carrying a black metal emblem. A red eye had been stamped across its center. Even Sydney recognized it from the news reports about extremist groups threatening supernatural communities. Evelyn moved closer to her father. Vincent's face became almost colorless. "These are hunter markings." Sydney looked at Adrian. "And the crates entered under your office's authority." For the first time that afternoon, Adrian did not have an immediate answer. The crown had given Sydney power, but she had used it to open a locked door. Behind that door, someone had hidden the beginning of a war. Adrian recovered first. "The emblem proves only that someone wants the court to believe my office is involved." His voice remained calm, but the room no longer leaned toward him as easily. Captain Elias placed the metal insignia on the council table. "The crates were entered through the freight gate at 1:23 this afternoon. The authorization code belongs to Councilor Blackwood's office." Adrian looked at him. "Codes can be copied." "Then we check the transport ledger," Sydney said. Adrian turned slowly. "You have already used one protected authority. I did not ask for another." She looked toward Vincent. "A ledger is not a royal secret if it records deliveries into a building full of people." Vincent gave one quiet nod. "Bring it." A clerk hurried from the hall and returned with a thick leather book. Every shipment had been written by hand beside a printed security code. Sydney moved closer. She was not an investigator. She was a woman who had spent years comparing grocery receipts, hospital bills, and late fees because one missing number could mean losing electricity for a week. Numbers told stories when people tried not to. She traced the entries with one finger. Wine, imported candles, medical supplies. Then 3 shipments listed as archival steel, each approved by Adrian's office. The first 2 had signatures, the third did not. "This line was added later," Sydney said. Adrian's mouth curved faintly. "Based on what expertise?" "The ink is darker, the handwriting leans right instead of left, and the entry number breaks the sequence." Vincent stepped beside her. His pale face remained unreadable, but his attention sharpened. Archivist Hale inspected the page. "She is correct." Adrian folded his hands behind his back. "A forged entry proves sabotage. It also proves someone expected the crates to be found," Sydney said. "Why hide evidence in a place where 17 employees could see it?" The question moved through the court. Vincent looked toward the red emblem, because the purpose was not concealment. "It was accusation," Sydney finished. Adrian's eyes cooled. Before she could answer, a council aide entered carrying a document sealed in black wax. "Your Majesty, the human separation decree has been prepared for emergency signature." Vincent did not take it. "Who ordered that?" "Councilor Blackwood's office." Adrian did not deny it. "Hunter materials were discovered beneath your home. Human staff had access to the service entrance. Delaying action would be irresponsible. You want every human removed before the evidence is examined," Sydney said. "I want the princess protected. You locked 17 people in a room with no ventilation. An error that was corrected after I used one of the only powers available to me." Adrian stepped closer to the silver boundary around her. "Perhaps that was the point of the test. To see whether you would spend royal authority on servants while a threat moved closer to the heir." Evelyn stood beside Vincent, listening. Sydney saw the child's fingers tighten around the folds of her dress. "People do not become less innocent because they wear uniforms," Sydney said. The crown warmed. Vincent looked at the unsigned decree, then at Adrian. "No separation order will be signed today." "Then suspend it formally," Adrian replied, "unless the regent prefers to preserve her remaining power." If Sydney used a second authority, Adrian weakened her. If she refused, he could claim she cared more about power than human lives. Sydney faced Hale. "Can the decree be enacted without the king's signature?" But the council may begin emergency removals before sunset if a majority declares immediate danger. Several nobles shifted uneasily. Adrian already had votes. Sidney looked at Vincent. How long would people have to leave? 1 hour, he said. Some live inside protected districts, Hale added. Removing them without preparation could separate families and interrupt medical care. Sidney thought of Margaret waiting at home, probably believing her granddaughter was carrying trays at an ordinary event. Then I suspend the decree until a public hearing can examine the evidence. Hale raised his hand. State the protected authority. By the Mercy Covenant, I suspend any emergency removal of human residents or workers from Marino territory until the source of these crates is established. Silver light crossed the floor and climbed the sealed decree. The black wax turned white. Adrian watched it happen without blinking. 2 powers used, he said softly. 1 remains. A bell rang from the upper corridor once. Vincent turned toward the sound. Captain Elias touched the receiver at his ear. His expression changed. Your Majesty. Princess Evelyn's escort has lost visual contact. Vincent looked beside him. The space where Evelyn had been standing was empty. A folded piece of paper rested on the floor. Sidney picked it up before anyone else could. Written across it in dark red ink were 7 words. The human queen wanted her crown back. The ballroom erupted into frightened whispers. Vincent's eyes fixed on Sidney. All warmth vanished from his face. Where is my daughter? The accusation struck the room before Vincent's voice finished echoing. Sidney held the folded note between 2 fingers, careful not to smear the dark red ink. I do not know where she is. Vincent crossed the distance between them so quickly that the candles bent in his wake. He stopped at the edge of the silver circle, protecting the Mercy Regent. The crown flashed once, warning him back. His face became whiter than marble. My daughter trusted you, and I would never use that trust against her. She disappeared while every guard in this hall was watching you. Adrian stepped forward. Your Majesty, the evidence is clear. The human gained the princess's confidence, accepted her crown, then created enough confusion to remove her. Sidney looked at the note again. This was written to make you believe that. How convenient, Adrian said. All outer doors remain sealed. No one has left Marino Hall. The princess must still be inside. Search every room, Vincent ordered. No one searches alone. Check the service passages, the roof archives. Keep the guests here. Guards moved instantly. Sidney forced herself to think past the fear spreading through the court. Evelyn had been beside Vincent only moments earlier. No cry, no struggle. The child had left quietly. That meant she had either followed someone she trusted or gone somewhere she already knew. Vincent turned back to Sidney. Give me one reason not to confine you until she is found. Because you are looking for someone weak enough to blame instead of asking where your daughter would go. The ballroom went silent. Adrian's expression sharpened. Vincent's eyes darkened from silver to storm grey. You know nothing about my daughter. I know she hides in libraries when adults speak over her. I know she keeps her mother's book close when she is afraid. I know she stopped trembling when someone finally listened. Sidney took 1 step toward the boundary. Do you know where she goes when she thinks no one will believe her? Vincent said nothing. That silence answered more than words. Adrian moved beside him. This is manipulation. She is turning your fear into authority. Sidney looked directly at Vincent. I am trying to help you find Evelyn, then tell me what you know. Sidney closed her eyes and replayed every sentence from the library. Her mother used to read this to me. I do not remember the ending. Later, before the ceremony, Evelyn had said she wanted to show Sidney her crown, but there had been something else in the way she spoke about her mother, as though Isabelle had left more than a story behind. She mentioned a place where she could hear her mother. Sidney said slowly. Vincent's expression changed, only slightly, in no such place. That was not a denial. Adrian glanced between them. Your Majesty, do not entertain this. Sidney felt the final unused authority of the crown resting against her skin. She had 1 power left, 1 question that Vincent would be forced to answer under oath. If she used it now, she would have nothing remaining for the hearing Adrian clearly wanted to control. But Evelyn was missing. Power saved for later could not protect a child now. Archivist Hale, Sidney forward. Can the regent compel a sworn answer from the king? Hale hesitated. Yes, once. The answer cannot be false, concealed, or deliberately incomplete. Vincent understood before she spoke. Do not do this. His voice was low, no longer royal. Personal, then answer without the crown. Some doors were sealed for a reason. Your daughter may be behind one of them. Adrian raised his hand. This is an attack on royal privacy. Sidney ignored him. Vincent Marino, Did Queen Isabelle leave a hidden room inside this house where Evelyn could hear her voice? The crown grew cold. Silver light moved across the floor, climbed Vincent's shoes, and circled his wrist like a thin ribbon. He closed his eyes. For centuries, kings had forced truth from others. Now truth had come for him. Yes, he said. The single word shook the silence. Evelyn's empty place beside the throne seemed to widen. Sydney kept her voice steady. Where is it? The silver light tightened, demanding completeness. Vincent looked toward the western corridor. Behind the old nursery in the private family wing, Isabelle created a remembrance room before she died. It contains recordings, letters, and objects meant for Evelyn when she was older. Why was it sealed? Because I could not enter it without remembering everything I lost. His confession hung in the air. Sydney saw what he had done. He had closed the room to protect himself and called it protection for his daughter. Take me there. Adrian stepped between them. The human does not enter a sealed royal chamber. Vincent turned his pale face toward him. Move. Adrian obeyed, but his eyes followed Sydney with cold calculation. Vincent led her from the ballroom, Captain Elias and Archivist Hale close behind. The western halls were darker, quieter, untouched by the ceremony. At the end of a narrow corridor stood a white door covered in dust. Vincent pressed his hand to the wall beside it. A hidden lock released with a soft click. Beyond the door waited an abandoned nursery, a silent entrance concealed behind faded moon-patterned wallpaper. From the other side came the faint sound of a child crying. Vincent reached for the hidden handle, but Sydney stopped him. Do not enter as her king. His hand became still. Then how as her father? Vincent lowered himself until he was no taller than the child waiting beyond the wall. Sydney opened the door. Evelyn sat beneath a painted moon, clutching her mother's music box against her chest. She looked up at Vincent with tears in her grey eyes. I did not run away from Sydney, she whispered. I ran because Councilor Blackwood said she would be gone before sunset. Evelyn's confession changed the room. Vincent remained crouched near the doorway, his pale face still, but the hand resting on his knee slowly closed. What exactly did Councilor Blackwood say? He asked. Evelyn held the music box tighter. He was speaking to one of his guards near the council chamber. He said Sydney would not matter after sunset. He said once she failed the test, the council could remove her and prove humans should never be trusted. Vincent's eyes darkened. Did he see you? No, I was behind the curtain. Sydney stepped into the hidden room. It was smaller than she expected, no more than 12 feet across, with moon-shaped lights painted along the ceiling. A child's desk stood beneath one wall. Shelves held letters tied with silver ribbon, tiny shoes, pressed flowers, and framed photographs of Queen Isabelle smiling beside a much younger Vincent. The room did not feel like a tomb. It felt like someone had prepared love for the future and then been denied the chance to deliver it. Evelyn looked at Sydney. I thought if the crown chose you, Mother would speak. Vincent lifted his head. What do you mean? The child opened the music box. A soft melody filled the room, delicate and uneven from years of silence. Mother told me once that the crown of mercy remembers the difference between someone who wants power and someone who protects people without it. Vincent stared at her. You were 4 years old when she died. I remember more than you think. The words landed quietly. Vincent looked away. Sydney sat beside Evelyn on the carpet. Why did you believe your mother would speak through the crown? Evelyn pointed toward the wall behind Sydney. Because of the story. The moon garden lay on a small table. Another copy of the same blue book they had read in the library. Sydney opened it. Several passages had been underlined in faded silver ink. At the back, Queen Isabelle had written a single sentence. When mercy is freely chosen, the hidden garden opens. Sydney looked toward the painted moonflowers covering the wall. This is not only decoration. Archivist Hale entered carefully and studied the pattern. These symbols belong to the first royal covenant. They respond to an act of protection completed without personal reward. Sydney remembered the offers she had refused, the service employees she had released, and the decree she had suspended. The crown began to warm. Silver light spread from its pale stone, crossed her shoulders and reached the painted flowers. One by one the flowers opened. Not physically, in light, their petals glowed until the wall became a field of moonlit blossoms. Vincent rose slowly. A hidden panel released with a soft sound. Behind it rested a crystal disc. No memory seal, Hale whispered. Royal blood magic preserved without harm. Queen Isabelle must have placed it here before her death. Vincent did not move toward it. Why would she hide something from me? Sydney looked at the locked room, the letters never opened, and the memories he had avoided for 8 years. Maybe she was not hiding it from you. Maybe she was waiting for you to become willing to hear it. Vincent's gaze met hers. There was no anger in it now, only the weight of a truth he could not command away. Evelyn reached for his hand. He looked down as if surprised by the contact. Then he closed his fingers gently around hers. "Father," she whispered, "please listen this time." Vincent lowered himself beside her. Not on the throne, not above her. On the carpet, Sydney placed the blue book between them. "Tell him everything," she said. Evelyn took a careful breath. "I gave Sydney the crown because everyone at court wanted something from me. A promise, a vote, a perfect smile. Sydney only wanted me to stop being scared." Vincent's face tightened. "You should have told me. I tried." The music box continued its soft melody. "But whenever I said I was afraid, you added another guard." Vincent closed his eyes. Sydney watched the king understand that protection could become another kind of loneliness when fear made every decision. "I am sorry," he said. The words were quiet and imperfect. Evelyn leaned against him. Vincent stiffened for one heartbeat, then wrapped an arm around his daughter. The crown flashed. The crystal disc awakened. A woman appeared above it in silver light. Queen Isabelle had Evelyn's eyes and a calm smile, but when she began to speak, her expression carried urgency. "Vincent, if you are seeing this, then our daughter has chosen someone the crown considers merciful. Trust that choice. I did not die because of a random human attack. The event was arranged from inside our court." Vincent went completely still. Isabelle's image turned toward a point beyond the memory, as though she could see through the years. The person responsible still holds a seat on the council. He created fear between humans and vampires, then used that fear to gain power. I gathered proof, but I could not reveal it safely. The evidence is hidden inside the crown, protected until someone chooses compassion over reward. Evelyn's hand tightened around Vincent's. Sydney felt the silver band grow heavier. Isabelle's image flickered. "Do not punish the human world for the actions of one man, and do not let our daughter inherit a kingdom built on suspicion." The memory faded, leaving one final sentence in the air. "The traitor's name is Adrian Blackwood." At that exact moment, every light in Marino Hall went dark. Darkness swallowed the remembrance room, but the crown on Sydney's head continued to glow. Its pale stone cast a narrow silver circle across Evelyn, Vincent, and the fading image of Queen Isabelle. Beyond the hidden wall, alarms began to ring through Marino Hall. One bell, two. Then a deeper tone reserved for a challenge to royal authority. Captain Elias touched the receiver at his ear. "The main security system is no longer responding. Council guards control the north corridor." Vincent rose, keeping Evelyn close. "Contact the loyal houses. Communication outside the estate has been blocked." Archivist Hale moved toward the crystal disc, but Isabelle's image had nearly disappeared. The memory revealed the traitor, but not the evidence she mentioned. Sydney touched the crown. A faint warmth pulsed beneath her fingers. She said the proof was hidden inside this. "Then we remove it somewhere secure," Elias said. Sydney tried once more. The silver branches did not move. Vincent looked toward the concealed entrance. Adrian knew this room had awakened. "How?" Sydney asked. "The crown's energy passes through every royal ward in the building," Hale explained. "Anyone monitoring the security network would have seen it." The lights beyond the room flickered red, then failed again. A voice filled the corridors through the public address system. Adrian's voice, calm, measured. "Members of the council, remain where you are. The king has surrendered judgment to an unidentified human who has compromised the princess and interfered with emergency law. Until order is restored, the council's safeguard is in effect." Vincent's face became colder. "There is no legal safeguard that allows him to seize my home." Hale looked troubled. "There is if he claims the crown has placed the heir under outside influence. He will ask the council to suspend your authority until a formal review." "Can he succeed?" Sydney asked. "Not while the full truth is known." Hale glanced at the dark crystal disc. But only the people in this room heard Isabelle's message. Adrian's voice continued through the hall. "The human regent has exhausted all three protected authorities. She can no longer compel truth, suspend emergency action, or demand a hearing. The king has concealed her location. For the protection of Princess Evelyn, all royal guards are ordered to recognize council command." Sydney felt the trap close. Adrian had forced her to spend every power before revealing himself. The locked service wing, the separation decree, Evelyn's disappearance. Each crisis had been designed to drain the crown. "He planned the entire afternoon," she said. Vincent looked at her. "Not Evelyn's choice, no. But once she chose me, he adapted." Sydney remembered the darker ink in the transport ledger, the hunter symbols placed where workers would find them, and the note blaming a human queen. The crates were never meant to threaten the estate. They were meant to create panic, frame the human staff, and justify the decree. Hale nodded slowly. "Then the earlier attacks may have served the same purpose." Vincent's eyes remained fixed on Isabelle's silent image. She said Adrian arranged the event that caused her death. His voice was quiet, but grief pressed beneath every word. Sydney studied the crown's pale stone. It showed no documents, no records, no names beyond the memory they had heard. Why did Isabelle separate the accusation from the proof? Because a memory can be copied or altered, Hale said. Evidence protected by the crown would require a second condition before release. Evelyn lifted her head from Vincent's side. Mother said the crown knows when kindness is real. Sydney looked at her. The hidden room opened after I helped people without taking Adrian's offers. That was the first condition, Hale said. The second may involve what the regent does after learning the truth. Footsteps filled the nursery outside, organized, approaching. Elias closed the hidden panel and drew a heavy cabinet across it without noise. We have less than a minute. Vincent looked at Sydney. You will remain here with Evelyn. No, Adrian wants the crown. He wants the court to believe I stole it. Hiding me helps him. Walking into the ballroom helps him reach you. Sydney stepped closer. Then do not let him define why I am walking in. For centuries, Vincent had given orders and watched the world obey. Now a human woman stood before him wearing the authority of his house, asking not for protection but partnership. The alarm stopped. The sudden silence was worse. Evelyn opened the music box and removed a tiny silver object hidden beneath its velvet lining. It was a key shaped like a crescent moon. Mother told me this opened the place where kings keep promises. Vincent stared at it. The central archive. Hale's expression changed. Royal records, financial transfers, security orders, and sealed council communications are stored there. Sydney understood. Isabelle had not placed every piece of evidence inside the crown. She had placed the path to it in Evelyn's hands. Adrian will go to the ballroom, Sydney said. He needs witnesses when he accuses us. Vincent took the crescent key from hidden door, and the archive lies beneath the throne. A heavy knock sounded from the nursery. Adrian's guards had arrived. Vincent offered Sydney his hand. This time it was not a command. Stay beside me. Sydney placed her hand in his, only until we reach the truth. Together, they stepped into the darkened corridor while the final strip of afternoon light faded behind the curtains. They had less than an hour before sunset, a kingdom turning against them, and a dead queen's secret waiting beneath the throne. The corridor outside the hidden nursery was no longer empty. 6 council guards stood beneath the red emergency lights, their uniforms marked with Adrian's silver crest instead of Vincent's royal seal. Captain Elias moved in front of Evelyn, but Vincent raised one hand before anyone could act. Stand aside, he said. The guards hesitated. Their training told them to obey the king. The order in their receivers told them the king had been suspended. One of them lowered his eyes. Your Majesty, Councilor Blackwood has requested that the human regent surrender the crown and appear before the court. Requested, Vincent asked, or commanded? The guard could not answer, and the air turned cold enough to cloud Sydney's breath. He could have forced the entire corridor to kneel. Everyone knew it. He did not. No one in this house will be compelled, he said. Choose whom you serve. A man asking for truth or a man hiding behind fear? 2 guards immediately moved aside, then a third. The remaining 3 stayed in place, ashamed but unmoving. Vincent looked at Elias. Take Evelyn, Archivist Hale, and every human employee to the South Gallery. Lock nothing, keep the exits open. Evelyn caught her father's sleeve. You are coming too. Vincent knelt in front of her. I need to finish what your mother began. That is what you always say before you leave. The words stopped him. Sydney watched his pale face change, not with anger but recognition. Vincent placed both hands gently around Evelyn's. Then listen carefully. I am not leaving you because the kingdom matters more. I am making sure there is still a kingdom safe enough for you to inherit. When this is over, I will return to you. That is not a royal promise. It is your father's. Evelyn studied him, then nodded. She removed the crescent key from his palm and pressed it into Sydney's hand. Mother trusted the person wearing the crown. Sydney closed her fingers around it. I will bring it back. Elias led Evelyn and Hale toward the south stairs. The guards who had stepped aside joined them. Vincent waited until his daughter disappeared around the corner before turning to Sydney. The central archive is directly beneath the throne platform. Only the royal key can open it, but Adrian controls the ballroom. Then he expects us to avoid it. He expects me to enter openly and challenge him. Vincent's eyes moved toward the distant sound of Adrian addressing the court. If I use force while you wear the crown, he will claim I violated the Mercy Covenant and endangered the regent. Half the houses will withdraw their support before sunset. Sydney understood the design. Adrian did not need to defeat Vincent. He only needed the king to look dangerous in front of frightened witnesses. So you cannot be the one who walks into the ballroom. Vincent looked at her. Neither can you. I am the reason everyone is gathered there. You are also the person Adrian needs to discredit, which means he will let me speak long enough to condemn myself. Vincent's jaw tightened. That is not a plan. That is volunteering to stand inside his trap. No. It is making him believe the trap still belongs to him. Sydney looked down the corridor. You take the service passages to the lower archive entrance. I walk into the ballroom and keep Adrian talking. When he offers me money, safety, or a way out, I make him explain why he thinks I will accept. He wants witnesses. Let him have them. You have no protected authorities left. I still have the crown. The crown cannot protect you from every lie. Then the truth will have to do the rest. For several seconds, his face remained almost white beneath the red lights, but the cold around him eased. You are asking me to trust you in a room controlled by my enemy. I am asking you to treat me as a partner instead of another person you can hide behind a locked door. The words reached him. Sydney saw it in the way his hand opened at his side. Slowly, Vincent removed the silver ring he wore on his right hand. The Marino crest was carved into its surface, surrounding a small moonstone. This belonged to Isabelle, he said. The crescent key opens the archive. This ring opens the sealed royal records inside it. He placed it in Sydney's palm beside the key. The metal was colder than the crown. Do not lose either. I will not. And do not let Adrian separate you from the court. I will not. Vincent took one step closer, then stopped before the space between them became another command. Come back, he said quietly. Not because the crown requires it. Evelyn is waiting for you. His grey eyes held hers, and so am I. Sydney felt the weight of the crown, the key, the ring, and every person depending on what happened before sunset. Then find the evidence, she said. I will give you the time. Vincent disappeared into the dark service passage without another word. Sydney turned toward the ballroom alone. Adrian's voice carried through the doors, telling the court that a human had stolen their future. She tightened her hand around Isabelle's ring, lifted her chin and walked inside before he could finish the lie. Sydney entered the ballroom alone, and every face turned toward her. Adrian stood beneath the throne platform, surrounded by council guards and nobles who had been ordered to remain in place. Behind him, the last strip of afternoon light pressed against the heavy curtains. Less than 40 minutes remained before sunset. Adrian watched Sydney cross the black marble floor with the calm satisfaction of a man who believed every path still led to him. The human regent returns, he said, without the king. Sydney stopped inside the silver circle where the crown had first accepted her. You wanted witnesses. I wanted order. Then why did you shut down the security system? A murmur passed through the room. Adrian lifted one hand. Because Vincent Marino concealed a compromised regent and removed the princess from council protection, Evelyn is safe. According to whom? According to her father. Adrian smiled. The same father who surrendered royal judgment to you. Sydney let the insult settle. She did not defend Vincent. Not yet. You offered me a home, money, and medical care for my grandmother. Compassion is not corruption. No. Adrian descended one step from the platform. There is still time to choose wisely. Declare that Vincent's grief has made him unstable. Confirm that the princess acted under emotional influence. Return the crown, and your grandmother will receive the finest care in the country. Sydney touched neither the crown nor Isabelle's ring hidden in her palm. And what happens to the human workers? They leave Marino territory peacefully. The families? Relocated. The patients whose treatment depends on Marino hospitals? Transferred. The children attending protected schools? Adrian's patients thinned. Temporary discomfort prevents permanent conflict. Sydney looked across the court. That is how cruelty always introduces itself, as something temporary. Several nobles lowered their eyes. Adrian came closer. You know nothing about conflict. For the first time, something personal entered his voice. My family trusted humans once. Hunters found our home before dawn. The room grew quiet. Sydney saw the pain beneath his control. It was real, so was what he had chosen to do with it. I am sorry for what happened to them, she said. Adrian almost laughed. Do not offer me pity, I am not. I am telling you that suffering explains fear. It does not give fear permission to rule everyone else. His face hardened. Humans created this war. Then why did you need fake hunter crates? The whispering stopped. Adrian's gaze flicked toward the council table. Only for a second, Sydney saw it. You planted symbols in the basement, she continued. You sealed human employees near them. You prepared a separation order before the crates were discovered. Then you blamed me when Evelyn disappeared. Accusations without proof, you are right. Sydney opened her hand. Isabelle's silver ring caught the candlelight. Adrian's composure cracked. Where did you get that? From the king. That ring belongs in the royal archive. Then you know what it opens. A low mechanical sound rose beneath the throne. Adrian turned, but he was too late. Silver lines appeared across the platform as the hidden archive unlocked below. Vincent emerged from the side passage carrying a sealed black ledger. His pale face was calm, his grey eyes were not. It opens the record you failed to erase, he said. Captain Elias entered behind him with Archivist Hale and 3 council clerks. Hale held a crystal recorder against his chest. Vincent placed the ledger on the central table. Payments to hunter groups, transport codes for the crates, orders authorizing false threats against my daughter. Private communications preparing the human separation decree 6 months before the first warning appeared. Adrian looked around the room, fabricated. Sydney raised the crescent key, the crown answered. Silver light poured from the pale stone and struck the royal archive beneath the throne. The air above the court filled with images, bank transfers, security orders, recorded conversations. Adrian's own voice directing agents to create enough fear that Vincent would sign away human protections and grant the council emergency military power. Then Queen Isabelle appeared in silver light. These records are sealed under my authority, she said. They cannot be altered without destroying the archive itself. Adrian stepped backward. She misunderstood. The final recording began. His younger voice filled the hall, speaking to an unseen guard. The Queen knows too much. Make the attack look human. Vincent will close the borders himself. The court went completely still. Adrian looked towards Sydney. Desperation replaced calculation. He reached for the crown. The silver circle flared, stopping his hand before it touched her. A dark mark appeared across his council seal, burning away its authority without harming him. Sydney could have demanded punishment. She could have asked Vincent to end everything in one command. Instead, she faced the witnesses. Adrian Blackwood will not disappear into a private cell, and he will not become another secret used to frighten people. He will receive a public trial before representatives of both communities. Every victim will hear the evidence. Every charge will be answered. Vincent studied her. You are asking for mercy? No, Sydney said. I am asking for justice that does not become revenge. The crown flashed brighter than it had all afternoon. Adrian's silver crest broke apart and fell harmlessly to the floor. The council guards stepped away from him. Above the western curtains, the final sunlight turned gold. Sydney reached for the crown, expecting it to return to Evelyn. Instead, it lifted from her head and hovered in the center of the ballroom. Archivist Hale stared upward. The covenant is not finished. A voice older than the court spoke from within the silver light. Before the crown returns to the child, the king must answer what power was made to protect. The silver crown hovered above the center of the ballroom. Turning slowly in the last light of day, no one moved. Adrian stood without his council crest, surrounded by guards who no longer answered to him. Sydney remained inside the glowing circle, her dark hair loose where the crown had rested. Vincent faced the ancient light with Queen Isabelle's ledger open beside him. The voice came again, deeper than any person in the room. What was power made to protect? A line of silver fire traced the floor and stopped at Vincent's feet. Archivist Hale lowered his head. The covenant requires the reigning monarch to answer without title, defense, or command. Vincent looked toward the throne. For more than 600 years, that chair had answered every question for him. It represented order, survival, authority. Tonight it looked like a distance he had spent centuries building between himself and everyone he feared losing. The doors opened behind the gathered court. Captain Elias entered with the human employees, several loyal council members, and Evelyn between them. The little girl searched the room until she found Sydney. Relief crossed her face, then she looked at her father. Vincent's eyes remained fixed on her as she walked forward. He did not order anyone to clear a path. The nobles moved aside on their own. Evelyn stopped beside Sydney, but she did not take the crown. Father has to answer first, she said. Vincent descended from the platform and stepped into the silver circle. Power was made to protect the kingdom, he said. The crown remained suspended. The ancient voice offered no reply. Hale breathed quietly. The covenant has rejected the answer. A nervous murmur spread through the court. Vincent looked at the people around him, nobles who had obeyed him out of habit. workers who had been locked behind service doors, a daughter who had needed a stranger to notice she was tired, a human woman who had received power and used it for everyone except herself. No, Vincent said. His voice was lower now. That is what kings tell themselves. He removed the royal signet from his hand and placed it on the table beside Isabelle's records. I believed protecting the throne meant protecting everyone beneath it. When Isabelle died, I used fear as proof that every wall was necessary. I closed rooms because I could not face them. I surrounded Evelyn with guards because listening to her required more courage than watching doors. Evelyn's grey eyes filled, but she did not look away. Vincent continued, I allowed Adrian to turn my grief into policy. I nearly signed a decree that would have displaced innocent families. I treated human lives as risks to be managed, not people worthy of law. And when my daughter disappeared, I accused the person she trusted because blame was easier than admitting I did not know where my own child went when she was afraid. The ballroom held its breath. Vincent looked at Sydney. You had every reason to use the crown for yourself. Instead, you opened a locked door. You protected workers whose names you did not know. You defended my daughter when doing so, placed your own future at risk. You asked for a public trial when revenge would have been easier. He turned back to the hovering crown. Power was not made to protect the throne. It was made to protect those who have no throne, no title, and no voice strong enough to command a room. The crown blazed with silver light. Every candle in Marino Hall reignited at once. The black wax on the human separation decree cracked down the center. Vincent lifted the document and tore it into 2 clean pieces. The decree is void, he said. No emergency removal will proceed. The council's private military authority is dissolved. Beginning tonight, all security orders affecting humans require review by representatives from both communities. Adrian spoke from across the room. You are surrendering sovereignty to fear. Vincent looked at him without anger. No, I am removing fear from sovereignty. He ordered the creation of an independent court for Adrian's public trial with access to every record Isabelle had preserved. He restored the rights of the human employees. He established legal protection for families living in Marino territory. He required that future royal decrees include public review whenever innocent lives could be displaced. None of the promises depended on Sydney accepting a title. None could be withdrawn if she left. Only then did the crown drift toward Evelyn. The child raised both hands, but before she touched it, she looked at Sydney. Do you want to keep it a little longer? Sydney smiled. One afternoon was enough to learn how heavy power becomes when people need it. She guided the crown into Evelyn's hands. The silver branches softened with light, accepting the heir again. Evelyn did not place it on her head. She held it against her heart. Vincent knelt before his daughter, not because the covenant ordered him to, but because he chose to meet her at eye level. I promised I would return, Cheek. You did. I will still protect you. With more guards? A faint smile reached Vincent's face. With fewer locked doors, Evelyn leaned into him, and this time he did not freeze. He held her as the final sunlight vanished behind the curtains. The Mercy Regency ended at sunset, but the silence that followed was no longer built from fear. It was the silence of an entire kingdom realizing that its most powerful law had not asked whether its king was strong. It had asked whether he was willing to change. 3 months later, Marino Hall no longer felt like a place built to keep the world outside. The heavy curtains still protected vampire guests from the afternoon sun, but the doors stood open. Human employees used the same main entrance as everyone else. Families crossed the marble floor without being searched twice. Children from both communities studied together in the eastern classrooms, where Evelyn had insisted the first shelf be low enough for every child to reach. Adrian Blackwood's trial had lasted 7 weeks. Every financial record, security order, and preserved message had been examined by judges representing both humans and vampires. He was removed from the council, stripped of political authority, and sentenced under public law. No hidden chamber, no secret punishment. The families harmed by the false attacks received formal apologies, financial restitution, and access to the records that had once been concealed from them. Queen Isabelle's name was cleared before the full court. Her portrait was moved from the abandoned nursery to the central hall, where Evelyn could see it without passing through a locked door. Sydney attended the final hearing beside her grandmother. Margaret Bennett had received the medical care she needed, but not as payment for Sydney's loyalty. Vincent established an independent community fund with transparent rules and outside oversight. Margaret qualified through the same process as every other patient. Sydney had demanded that condition before accepting any help. She refused a royal apartment. She refused a ceremonial title. She refused every position that depended on remaining personally close to Vincent. Instead, she accepted a salaried role as royal advocate for human affairs, with the legal authority to review policies, question the council, and disagree with the king in public. On her first morning, she returned a 12-page proposal to Vincent with 32 corrections marked in blue ink. He read every one. "You could have phrased this more gently," he said. Sydney sat across from his desk, wearing an ordinary navy dress and the same inexpensive black hair clip Evelyn had borrowed months earlier. "You could have written a better proposal." Vincent looked at her for a long moment. Then, to the shock of 3 advisors, the Vampire King smiled. His greatest change was not written into law. It happened each evening at 7 o'clock when he stopped working and walked to Evelyn's room. Some nights they read The Moon Garden. Other nights Evelyn talked while he listened without calling a guard, summoning an advisor, or trying to solve every fear before she finished describing it. The first time she asked him to leave the door open, he did. The first time she asked for privacy, he gave it. Protection had stopped meaning control. One quiet afternoon, Sydney found them in the garden behind Marino Hall. Evelyn was weaving wildflowers into a crooked circle, while Vincent sat on a stone bench pretending not to notice petals collecting on his black coat. The garden had once been closed to human visitors. Now children ran between the hedges while their parents spoke beneath the trees. Evelyn saw Sydney and hurried toward her. "Do not move. That usually means trouble," Sydney said. Evelyn placed the flower crown on her head. It leaned to one side, perfect. Sydney touched it carefully. "I thought we agreed I did not have to be perfect. You do not, the crown does." Vincent approached, his face still paler than everyone around him, though the cold distance in it had softened. He waited until Evelyn ran back toward the fountain before speaking. "She has been planning that all morning. Then I am honored. She wants you to stay for dinner." Sydney glanced at him. "Only Evelyn?" Vincent did not hide behind royal silence this time. No, the answer was simple. "Honest, I want you to stay." Months earlier, he would have turned that desire into an order because commands were easier than uncertainty. Now he stood before her without a throne, a decree, or a crown between them. "I do not want you here because an ancient law chose you," he said. "I want you here because when you were given power, you noticed everyone it had forgotten. You saw my daughter, you saw the workers behind a locked door. You saw justice when the rest of us wanted revenge, and you saw the man beneath the king before I was ready to become him." Sydney looked toward Evelyn, who was showing 2 human children how to fold paper moons. "I am not promising forever today, I know. I am not becoming part of your court just because the story would look prettier that way. I know that too, and tomorrow when I disagree with you, I will still say so." Vincent's faint smile returned. "That is the part I trust most." Sydney considered him beneath the open sky where the last light of afternoon touched the garden walls. "Then I will stay for dinner." He offered his hand, not to lead her, not to claim her, only to ask. Sydney placed her hand in his, and they walked toward Evelyn together. No one bowed, no ancient law awakened, no silver light crossed the ground. The kingdom had already changed. For one afternoon, Sydney Bennett had carried the authority of a vampire crown. But history did not remember her because she had taken power. It remembered her because she had returned it after teaching a king what power was meant to protect. And in the years that followed, Vincent Marino never forgot the lesson. Even the coldest kings can learn to kneel before kindness, not because kindness is weak, but because it refuses to become cruel when the whole world gives it permission.